Before we start, I want to acknowledge that we're meeting today on the stolen lands of the Wajak Noongar people. This is land that was stolen. It was colonized in a process of genocide. And it always was and always will be Aboriginal lands. But we're here again today after more than 2.5 years of genocide in Gaza, because there is still a genocide in Gaza. And that genocide has not stopped despite the so-called ceasefires that get signed by Israel that are then promptly ignored. It has not stopped even though Israel has supposedly declared that it has a border in Gaza that it will not cross, but it keeps doing so. It keeps bombing tents, keeps shooting people in the streets of Gaza, keeps encroaching further and further in a barbaric injustice.
Hey. Yeah.
The official number of those identified to have been killed stands at just above 73,000 in Gaza. That, of course, has to only be a lower estimate, a lower bound. Who knows how many remain under the rubble? Who knows how many bodies were so torn apart that they could not be identified? Who knows how many are missing? And then also, who knows how many have been critically wounded with injuries that will live with them the rest of their lives from this assault? How many children are growing up famished, with malnutrition having set into their body to such a level that it will never fully recover? This is what Israel has done in Gaza since October 2023, and it's what it continues to do. So that's why we're still here. We're still here because the Australian government has not yet done anything material to punish Israel for this. It has not expelled the Israeli ambassador. It has not placed any meaningful sanctions on the state of Israel. And it has not stopped the two-way arms trade between Australia and Israel either. All of these things continue. So that's why we continue to come out today. So we've got a number of speakers today. The first one, if you've been to the Israelis before, will be very familiar to you. It's Hiba Farah. Hiba is the Vice President of the Australian Palestine Advocacy Network. She's a staunch defender of Palestine, a staunch activist for Palestinian justice. She's also the current chairperson of Friends of Palestine WA. Please make her welcome.
Marhaba everyone. I would like to start by acknowledging that we are all meeting on the land of the Wajak Noongar people. I pay my respect to their elders, past and present. This land has never been ceded, was, is, and will forever be Aboriginal land. Before we begin, we pause. Because on this land, we must. Before we begin, we listen. Because on this land, we must. Before we begin, we remember. Because on this land, we must. We meet again, my friends, under the same sky that rains pain onto our people in Palestine. I address you to ask two questions that have haunted me for a long time. Does the world want the Palestinians to be perfect victims, as Muhammad al-Kurd wonders? And is there a pulse in the conscience of this world after nearly 3 years of genocide? Does the world see Palestine's wound and feel it? Does it hear the cries from Gaza and is still able to look away? Does it witness our grief and question whether our pain is worthy of being heard? Because these are wounds that do not disappear with time. They travel through generations. They live in the stories of grandparents, in the keys of homes left behind or gone forever, in the names of villages that remain alive even when they have been erased from maps. The world has ignored that wound for a long time. And for some among our people, the weight of being unheard for so long has forced them to lower their expectations, to normalize their pain, simply because the world has demanded it from them. For how long can a people remain hopeful in a world that refuses to acknowledge their suffering? A world that witnesses their slaughter and carries on with its life anyway, as if telling them, you must remain as perfect victims. And yet, there are others who refuse for generations to become the perfect victims. The world expects them to be silent, obedient, and invisible. But they didn't, and still refused to. They stood up, resisted. They reminded the humanity that there is no such thing as a perfect victim. A victim is still a human being. A people under oppression still have a voice, and justice requires more than sympathy. It requires action. From that spirit came the Freedom Flotilla, brave and determined human beings who crossed the seas not because they believed they could easily change the world, but because they refused to accept a world that had become comfortable with injustice. They sailed to challenge silence. They sailed to confront the normalization of suffering. They sailed because they understood that sometimes humanity is tested not by what we say, but by what we are willing to do. They could have chosen the safety of distance, like our government here. They could have returned home and accepted the role of helpless observers, but they did not. They carried a lesson that Palestine has taught the world again and again. Dignity is not something given by those in power. It is something people fight for and protect even in the darkest moments. I owe them to stand here in respect to everything they've done and demand action from our government for everything that has been done to them, for everything that they've endured. And while people around the world have taken a stand, institutions here in Australia must also be questioned. The investigation by the AFP into the treatment of Australian participants involved in the global Sumud flotilla following its interception raises another important question. Will Australia finally move beyond statements of concern and towards meaningful accountability? An investigation is only a first step, but accountability must follow. Because Australia cannot claim to stand for international law while ignoring actions that undermine it. A government cannot speak of peace while Palestinian civilians continue to endure devastation and a genocide, while systems that enable harm remain unchallenged. Australia's commitment to international law cannot be measured by words alone. It must be measured by action. As a country that claims to uphold human rights and international obligations, Australia has a responsibility to ensure it is not contributing directly or indirectly to violation of those principles. This requires more than statements of concern, because we do too well know they're not concerned. It requires examining military, diplomatic, and economic relationships that may enable harm. It requires supporting genuine accountability. It requires demanding equal application of international law. It requires protecting civilian lives without exception, because international law cannot be selective. Human rights cannot be conditional, and the suffering of the Palestinian people cannot be treated as less important. History will remember not only those who caused destruction, but those who stayed quiet about it and enabled it. So the question before us is simple. When humanity was tested, where did our people in power stand? Did they look away, or did they choose justice? You cannot claim to fund peace while enabling the machinery that destroys the possibility of it. Peace requires justice, and justice requires accountability, and accountability requires courage. And this takes us to institutions that remain behind. When bodies such as AFRA adopt definitions and policies without meaningful consultation with Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims, healthcare workers, while many have raised concerns about anti-Palestinian racism, discrimination, and silencing of advocacy for Palestinian human rights, we must ask: are our institutions protecting fairness and human rights, or are they creating new barriers for those already experiencing injustice? Silencing people who speak about suffering does not create peace. Ignoring racism does not protect communities. And justice cannot exist when some voices are treated as less worthy than others. Creating a hierarchy of discrimination where anti-Semitism sits at the top, while other forms of discrimination are treated like they hardly exist, does not help a multicultural society and allow bigoted individuals to thrive and take away everything that made our society what it once was: accepting, multiracial, and multicultural. This is the time when the alarm bells are raised to protect our society from hate and protect our civil rights from being destroyed. All this is a reminder that none of us is free until Palestine is free. Palestine has exposed them all: governments, institutions, and individuals. So let us always return to Palestine, because we must never allow the world to look away ever again. Palestine is not a headline today. Many Palestinians see today's devastation echoes of a history their families have carried for generations. The fear, the displacement, the attempt to make life unbearable until people are forced to leave. But Palestinian and Palestine has always answered with the same truth. Our people cannot be erased by destroying their homes. Our history cannot be buried beneath rubble. Our nation's existence cannot be defied by force. And we must always remember our story did not begin with one day. It is a story shaped by decades of displacement, siege, restrictions, and struggle for dignity, freedom, and the right to live. My friends, the deepest tragedy is not only the destruction of building, it is the destruction of empathy. Because when the suffering of one people becomes invisible, humanity itself is wounded. Palestine is not only a question of land or borders, it's a question of conscience. It is the mother whispering the name of a child no longer there. It is the father searching through dust for a heartbeat or a faint little voice. It is a child who still dreams, despite everything, of a future beyond fear. And after everything they have endured, they remain. What remains is Palestine. While advocating for accountability for the victims of the crimes committed against the Freedom Flotilla members, ask yourself, if this is how white, free people who can lean on their passports were treated in such inhumane way, imagine our brothers and sisters who've been taken hostages for years on end. No rights, no passport or nationality to protect them, and no news outlets following their story closely. Nothing. Keep them in your mind, in your hearts, and in your voices. I leave you with part of a poem by the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish. They searched his chest, but found nothing except his heart. They searched his heart, but found nothing except his people. They searched his voice, but found nothing there except his sorrow. They searched his sorrow, but found nothing there except his prison. They searched his prison, but found nothing there except themselves, bound by the chains they created. Free Palestine.
Hey everyone, I'm Mustafa, a third-generation Palestinian in the diaspora with family roots in Kazan near Haifa. Comrades, we stand here today for justice, freedom, and human rights for the Palestinian people. We reject all forms of hatred, including anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and anti-Palestinian racism. Hatred in all forms is dangerous and must be confronted whenever it happens. But we must also reject to conflate the criticism of Israel or opposition to Zionism with the hatred of Jewish people. One of the major concerns that have come across to my attention and something to flag about is this concerning Royal Commission. This process is the very conflation. APAN, the Australian Palestine Advocacy Network, has argued that anti-Zionism is a political position directed at a political ideology and state policies, not Jewish people or Judaism. Many Palestinians, lawyers, scholars, human rights advocates have stated this on numerous occasions, that this does not make that criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitism. We have also seen concerns raised by the Special Envoy's plan to combat anti-Semitism authored by Julian Segal. Critics, shame! Critics argue the proposal emerging after Bondi have used to advance measures that risk conflating advocacy for Palestinian rights and to have innocent people criticized with anti-Semitism, as you have seen in Queensland, rather than addressing the actual issue itself. While Zionism has been labeled automatically as anti-Semitism by the AHRA definition, attention is diverted from genuine racism, genuine hatred, to silence and about occupation, displacement, and the devastation in Palestine, especially Gaza. Shame! Our movement is not built on hatred. It is built on solidarity. It's built on equality, and it's built on freedom. We will continue to oppose all forms of hatred, including anti-Palestinian racism, Islamophobia, anti-Arab racism, and anti-Semitism. We will not be silenced from the river to the sea. I will now be introducing Janet Parker. Janet Parker is a long-term refugee rights and Palestinian solidarity activist, member of Socialist Alliance, and founding member of Jews for Palestine WA and Right to Protest WA. Please, everyone, welcome Janet.
Israel is writing one of the darkest pages in history, writes Francesca Albanese, of the genocide against the Palestinian people. Those of us here today know that to be true. And while those pages are being written and the vision replays on our screens every minute of every day, we have seen the rise of a solidarity movement across the globe that recognises this to be not just a fight for the Palestinians, but for the whole of humanity. There is something different, she observes, about today's genocide. It is openly incited. It is cynically denied. It is relentlessly supported, armed and weaponised by those who oppose it. While those who oppose it are beaten, criminalised and smeared. All the while, the so-called Western democracies are making unprecedented profits from war and surveillance and the removal of Palestinians from their land. It's an economy of genocide. Well, I think most of us know the limits of international law, that its efficacy is contingent on political will, and is, as the Special Rapporteur posits, in many ways the product of the same inequitable imperialist system that shields Israel with impunity. Today, as a speaker representing Jews for Palestine, I want to focus on this impunity and the ever more determined attempts to shut down our movement demanding justice. Across the globe, opposition to Israel is being criminalised. We've seen the thousands of arrests of solidarity activists in the UK, the kidnapping and deportation of activists in the US. Closer to home, we've seen the arrest of 33 activists in Queensland for using the now unlawful phrase "from the river to the sea." And here in WA, we're having to fight attempts to introduce new laws that would allow police the right to deny us permits for rallies that may cause animosity toward or harassment of a person or group of persons on grounds including race or ethno-religious origin. We believe this part of the bill, currently sitting before the WA Parliament, is designed to silence criticism of Israel and its genocide in Palestine. This intensification of authoritarianism has come in the wake of the tragic shooting at Bondi, a shooting that horrified us all and that we mourn for, but for which we do not accept blame. But from December 2025, the chorus of right-wing voices placing the blame on pro-Palestinian slogans and protests and demands has become deafening. We are being charged with responsibility for the rise in anti-Semitism. And while we acknowledge the rise, we reject the charge. Our movement has consistently condemned anti-Semitism, as we have condemned all forms of racism. We have to be crystal clear. To oppose genocide is not to be anti-Jewish. Our critique is aimed squarely at the murderous Israeli state and the political ideology that underpins it, Zionism. So who is ultimately responsible for this rise in anti-Semitism? I would argue that above all else, Israel's actions in Gaza and the West Bank are responsible. This, in combination with the determined campaign by Israel and their backers to conflate being Jewish with support for the Zionist, colonialist, militarist, apartheid ethno-state. Today I want to make some comments on the Royal Commission on Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion, because we've not really yet had an opportunity, I think, to take stock at our gatherings here about exactly what is going down there. Before even beginning to hear any evidence at the Royal Commission, Commissioner Bell adopted as its frame of reference the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. She described it as uncontroversial. The adoption was uncontroversial. This is a completely bizarre assertion, as in fact, even the lead drafter of that definition has expressed horror at the way it has been weaponised, stating it was never intended to be used as de facto hate speech code. In November 2025, 9 Jewish organisations, of which Jews for Palestine WA was one, signed an open letter opposing the adoption of this definition. And across the world, this opposition has been joined by over 1,300 Jewish scholars and over 40 Jewish organisations. The IHRA deems it is anti-Semitic to describe Israel as a racist endeavour. Yet the International Court of Justice has found Israel in breach of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racism. To date, the Royal Commission on Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion has allowed only pro-Israel Jewish organisations to provide evidence on the grounds that they represent the majority of Jews. In just the first 3 days of the public hearing, 23 of 36 witnesses characterised criticism of Israel, opposition to Zionism, and/or Palestine advocacy as in and of itself anti-Semitic. This included the wearing of kaffirs, the flying of Palestinian flags, and Free Palestine chants. The Australia-Palestine Advocacy Network and Loud Jew Collective were refused leave to appear at the Royal Commission, and the Jewish Council of Australia were only granted leave to cross-examine witnesses. Countless anti-Zionist Jews, including myself, and numerous anti-Zionist Jewish organisations have made written submissions explaining that the only anti-Semitism they have experienced has been from Jewish Zionists and the right-wing supporters of Zionism. And the abuse, the level of abuse and the vitriol does not bear repeating here. While the media focus has been on the Royal Commission, Special Envoy to Combat Anti-Semitism, Gillian Siegel, has been busy embedding this IHRA definition in a whole range of civil society organisations in a way that will soon start to dictate what we can do and what we can say in all areas of our lives. In February this year, the Australian Public Service Commission issued a circular directing all staff to familiarise themselves with the IHRA definition and advising that they are working with Siegel to determine how it will apply in public sector workplaces. On 13 June, just last week, the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency issued a joint statement with Gillian Siegel advising that they have adopted the IHRA definition as a reference tool. A reference tool supported by the Special Envoy's Handbook, which is called Understanding Anti-Semitism in Australia. To support, they say this is to support a consistent understanding of anti-Semitism in its contemporary forms. If you haven't already seen this handbook, I'd encourage you to take a look at it. It is available online and you can actually get copies sent to you. because it is my understanding that the powers that be hope to roll this out in all educational institutions, including not just campuses but in schools. The appendices of this handbook look at examples of professional WhatsApp chats and analyses them. And it takes as an example a post advertising the Sydney Harbour Bridge March in August 2025, and explores a response wherein someone raises a question about the genocidal racist Zionist project that has oppressed the Palestinians. And that poster goes on to describe Zionism as a supremacist ideology and makes reference to apartheid and ethnic cleansing. Fair. This, the handbook tells us, is anti-Semitic. Even though it doesn't mention Jews or Judaism, it says, it invokes generalisations and accuses Israel of apartheid, oppression, racism and genocide. Imagine that. The handbook further asserts that both anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are expressions of hatred towards Jews. And just this week, the Group of 8 report has been completed and handed down. That's the Group of 8 universities. I've yet to see this report, but the Australian Jewish News says a peak body of Jewish academics say it falls short of what is needed to bring about real change. We can only hope that this means it is not as authoritarian as it might have been. But simultaneously, we have Greg Craven on the warpath, tasked by Gillian Siegel with issuing report cards on the handling of anti-Semitism on university campuses. He recently announced that he was unable to even begin the process of grading university campuses because they all failed at the first hurdle. None of them, he said, had adopted a clear, enforceable definition of anti-Semitism, so efforts to combat anti-Semitism on campus are fundamentally compromised. He warned that further sectoral failure over the coming months should result in serious penalties that could impact funding or even registration. Well, these are just some of the recent examples of the attempts by the powers that be to silence our movement for justice and peace, all in the name of anti-Semitism, of combating anti-Semitism. But if you think about it, this is happening across the board and has been well before Bondi, well before the Royal Commission. In the arts, think Randa Abdel Fattah and Adelaide Writers' Week, think Jason Gillam and the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. In the media, think Antoinette Lattouf or ABC journalists not being allowed to use the G word, genocide. Or on our streets, think of those arrested in Brisbane for using the words from the river to the sea, or the people bashed and pepper sprayed in Sydney for protesting the hosting of war criminal Isaac Herzog in Sydney. You cannot. We must continue to fight every instance of this attempt to shut us down. We must continue to explain that you can't achieve social cohesion by suppressing opposition to genocide, by attempting to suppress our most basic instinct to choose love over hate. Nor can you fight anti-Semitism by exceptionalising it, elevating it as some kind of unique, special and particularly pernicious form of racism. Indeed, the Social Cohesion Report found that by 2025, negative sentiment toward Muslims was more than double that of Jews. And without a doubt, First Nations people bear the brunt of that racism. I believe, though, that we are making headway. The tide is turning. You will have seen the reports of the Pew Research Centre that did a very extensive research across 36 countries internationally. And they found that a majority of people across those 36 countries have a negative view of Israel and little or no confidence in its Prime Minister. I think we are making ground. And I think we have to seize this moment, up our activity, on the streets, in the BDS campaigns, in our workplaces, on our campuses, to demand that our government sanction Israel at all levels, economic, military and diplomatic. There is a campaign to expel the Israeli ambassador right now because of his stubborn assertion that the accusations of rape and torture made by flotilla members are all lies. This is a powerful moment to shift the balance. We can do this, but we have to strengthen our forces, rebuild our numbers on the streets and in our communities. Well, I started with words from Francesca Albanese, and I want to finish with her words from the recently published book, When the World Sleeps. Alone, she says, we are as fragile as the wings of a butterfly, but united, solid and supportive, we can create a storm. We will not be silenced. Instead, we must create a storm. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! Thank you.
All right, next I'm going to introduce a couple of musicians who are going to perform a song for us. Their names are Ozzy, is a Palestinian, and Johnny is an Irishman. Of course, the Irish are no strangers to colonisation and occupation at the hand of the British. So I want to introduce them as the Palestinians, which Johnny tells me has its origins actually Israel came up with it, thinking that paddy was a slur for Irish people. But the Irish, of course, took it up, and now, yes, the Palestinians do stand with Palestine. Of course they do. I want to introduce the Palestinians up to the stage now to perform for us.
Hey everybody, thanks for having us, thanks for putting up with us. This is a song written by an Irishman, Martin Lee is his name. He wrote this song unfortunately 2 years ago and we're still singing it. I just want to really thank him for giving us his blessing to sing it here today in Perth on Wajak Lungerland. Hospital, the sacred room, or the wounded, sick and dead. Those crowded halls, the last refuge, they can't be touched, he said. They can't be touched by the weapons of war, weapons sent to destroy. They can't be touched, says the rule of law, that the world is protected by. But not in Gaza, but not in Gaza. But not in Gaza, but not in Gaza. still life. A child's cry to be fair. Forced starvation is a crime, and it can't be used, it is said. It can't be used as a weapon of war, as an act of genocide. It can't be used as a rule of law that the world is protected by. But not in Gaza, but not in Gaza, but not in Gaza, but not in Gaza. Hospitals are not a target. Patients are not a target. Nurses are not a target. Doctors are not a target. Health workers are not a target. Aid workers are not a target. Journalists are not a target. Civilians are not a target. Children 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 are not a target. Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Okay, everyone, now we're going to begin to march. Just so you're aware, so turn down right to Murray Street Mall, to William Street, down right to Hay Street, and then to Murray Street. From the river to the sea! And from the sea to the river! Free, free! Free, free! Sanction Israel now!